Last time you watched me make pizza in Japanese after coming back home after living in Japan for a year. The reason I made that video is that getting to eat the pizza I know and enjoy was much more difficult in Japan. And that's true not only for pizza. So today I wanted to talk about what I thought about Western food you can get on a daily basis in Japan. Because chances are that when you go to Japan for a longer period of time, even if it's for a vacation, after that initial rush when you come and want to taste all of the Japanese food, all the sushi and ramen you can imagine, you will start craving that Western sandwich. Or pizza, I don't know, maybe some fish and chips. Whatever it may be, you will find yourself craving some of the foods from your home. In my case, I'm from Poland and I never left Europe before I went to Japan. So I'll be comparing Japanese Western food to European one. Just so you know, the experience of an American or someone from India or Africa might be completely different. I feel like a lot of Japanese Western food is inspired by America, so it was even more of a culture shock as a person from Europe. Also, Japanese food in Europe isn't that accurate as well, so don't mind me when I'm complaining a lot about Western food in Japan. So I'm going to tell you about my experience with Japanese Western food, the good parts and the bad parts, and everything you might expect from Japan in that regard. Of course, you can find restaurants in Japan that will make very authentic Western food and will use imported ingredients like cheese, veggies or spices and will make it really as close to the original as possible. I'd say those places are most often found in big cities though, and where I lived, in Maebashi, Gunma by the way, it wasn't that common. Although I have to mention one pizza place in Maebashi we went to, and they served pretty tasty and authentic pizza, but they did put tomato soup in a cup. But mostly what you'll find in Japan in terms of Western food will be fast food chains like McDonald's obviously. Western inspired and so-called family restaurants such as Denny's or Bikuri Donki. Or convenience supermarket products you can buy and use to make a Western meal. Each of these three categories are a bit different in terms of authenticity, taste you might expect and the price range too. So first, let's begin with the fast food chains. I can right away say that fast food chains in Japan operate pretty much the same as in the West, at least from my experience, and taste is mostly what you would expect. So McDonald's was always my self-bet when I was craving a cheeseburger. However, where there was a difference was that some of the menu items such as mackerel were missing and instead you could buy shrimp burger or mini pancakes, something I never encountered when going to McDonald's in Poland, Italy or England. The size of the burger and the fries was comparable. The ketchup for your fries was arguably better in Japan, and it came in that little plastic box instead of a packet, and I really liked it because it was really easy to use. And this is often the case in Japan, that they will use better packaging for their products, and I could make a whole separate video about it. Also, that ketchup was much thicker and less sweet. Where the big difference lied was in drink sizes, and that's true not only for fast food. In Japan, people must just somehow not get dehydrated as easily because those drink sizes, small and medium, were just too small for me. And you could expect me to order another one when I was in the middle of my meal. We made a video about a meal you can get at McDonald's drive-thru in Japan over on my friend's channel. You can check it out over here. Next up are Western restaurants, and it's fun to go to one of these when you get tired of Japanese traditional food. But in my opinion, they are quite far from tasting and looking like the food back in Europe. They are more inspired by Western cuisine, but not quite right, like with the popular omuraisu, omelette covering fried rice with ketchup on top. We even had one of these in an old-school Western restaurant in Tokyo's Old Town. It's really good and be sure to give it a try, but again, it's not something you would find strolling down Champs-Élysées in Paris, for example. Another popular one are what they call hambago or Hamburg steak. And there are many places that are specializing in only this one dish. I've had a minced meat steak before, and there is a similar dish to that in Poland, kotleciki mielone z buraczkami. But in Japan it seems to be more popular, especially in that place called Bikuri Donki. This is a chain restaurant, and you can get one with processed cheese and pineapple on top. Not really my cup of tea, to be honest. What's interesting, in many of those places you can get rice as a side dish, And I guess this is something Japanese people like when eating a hearty meal, but it does ruin the illusion. You can also get pizza, salads and pasta that look very authentic at the first glance, but oftentimes they are more inspired by Italian and European food, but they will use some local ingredients, therefore the taste will be much different. When it comes to pizza, I found it could be really hit or miss and generally expensive. That's true for most Western restaurants. They will be more pricey than those serving traditional Japanese cuisine. Also, I have this image of pizza being quick and easy dinner option, but after paying 3,600 yen, so 35 US dollars, for a delivery pizza, and the pizza itself was only alright, you can imagine that I wouldn't order it very often. Okay, so we come to the last solution. If you crave Western food in Japan, can you just get the ingredients at the supermarket and cook it yourself? Well, theoretically, yes, but there are some obstacles. First and foremost, you need to have an apartment. So if you're there only for a vacation, you will probably struggle to do that. But then you didn't come to Japan for a longer period of time, did you? When you're opting for a quick bite to eat from konbini like 7-Eleven, you'll have options like sandwiches, ready-made lunches and fried chicken. And that food is whole another genre in itself. And generally it is pretty tasty, but I wouldn't get a microwave pasta. It's just disgusting. I mean, I tried it once or maybe twice, because I wanted to try another one, and it was just dreadful. I mean, don't get it. Ugh. Especially something really tasty is something called katsu sando, and basically this is a cutlet sandwich with pork cutlet inside of a very fluffy white bread and really nice sauce inside. And this is really delicious, so please, when you are in Japan, please try it because it's just delicious. And I don't think you can get it in Europe, unless you are from Poland and your babcia will make you that for your next train trip. Kanapka z kotletem schabowym, by the way. When it comes to supermarkets, the first thing I craved and was disappointed by was probably the Japanese bread. So coming from Europe, I had this idea of bread being very savory, with crunchy crust and usually made from a sourdough. I also had this idea of a toast bread, which is this white and fluffy bread, usually pre-cut into those square pieces, that is used mostly only for toasting. And usually you would make a hot sandwich with cheese and ham inside with that bread. So upon coming to Japan and realizing that almost all bread, at least the cheap bread, is that overly sweet and soft bread, well, it was just disappointing. But I mean, I got used to it. I made a lot of French toast, and once in a while I splurged on some French baguette to make it even more fancy. Because you can find some European, usually French or German, bakeries all over Japan, and it's really pricey, but it's worth the price. Also, the whole idea of bread in Japan is much different. I'm sorry, but I could just talk all day about bread in that video. But when you say pan, which means bread, by the way, in Japanese, and it comes from Portuguese, like other loan words in Japanese, pan generally means whole array of buns and baked goods and sweet and savory, or savory and sweet, and sometimes sweet bread. When we say bread in Poland, we usually imagine a loaf of bread or a roll or a baguette. But in Japan, they have the whole array of those breads, like korokke bread, yakisoba bread, blueberry bread, curry bread, and curry bread is the best. I love you, the curry bread. Okay, so going away from the bread, you can also get ham and cheese, and yeah, you can find pretty tasty ones, but usually you will get highly processed cheese and freakishly pink ham, which is also for some reason sweet. So you see, everything you want to buy and make will be just a little bit off. And also, if you want to get real unsalted butter, then you will pay a lot of money for that. It's really expensive. And for example, if you want to make a proper sandwich with ham, cheese, bread and unsalted butter, then first you will need to go a lot of shops and spend a lot of money. And at the end of the day, it will taste like disappointment. But if you crave one, then probably it will be just alright. So again, buying ingredients for Western food is not that cheap as you might expect in Japan. Also, there is a problem with cooking space in Japan. It is much different from cooking space in Europe, for example, and usually much smaller too. In my apartment, I had only one stove and a microwave, and I also later on had to buy a rice cooker. Because for the first period, I had to first cook the rice in a pot, then keep it in some bowl, and then cook rest of the ingredients, which, as you might expect, is really troublesome. So I saved myself a trouble and bought a separate machine for cooking rice only. So yeah, like making Western food in Japanese flat, if you have that small space, small kitchen with one stove, is really troublesome. So at the end of the day, you have a lot of options when it comes to Western food in Japan, but usually it won't be cheap and it won't taste as you expect it to, which is why I'd steer more towards Japanese food later on during my stay, because once you get used to it, it has a lot to offer. I just wanted to say that I complained a lot about Japanese Western food in that video, but please don't get me wrong, I love that country and I love Japanese food, I love Japanese Western food, because even though it doesn't taste like the food in Europe, but it still tastes good. It's part of the experience, right? The local food will always be different than the food you are having in your home country, right? This is one of the reasons you are traveling to different places to taste the food. Next time I will talk about which Japanese food I came to really love as a foreigner and which I just couldn't get used to. So please stay tuned and subscribe. So that's about it. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye, cheers!